The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 152. It's been a long time, but Sweet 16, here we come. That and more on this week's show. This is the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and Happy Easter. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. It's been a season of highs and lows for the young Wolverines, and it's not over yet. Friday, Michigan and Kansas will do battle down in Dallas at Cowboy Stadium. Hopefully we'll enjoy the outcome of this trip a bit more than our last visit to Jerry's World back in August. Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press will be with us in just a minute on Michigan Gameday to discuss last weekend's action and look ahead to Friday's big game with the Jayhawks. Before we get to that, let's start off with our Wolverine warmups. Coach Barnes-Arico and the ladies topped Villanova in their first game of the tournament, and while we're taping today, they are back in action against Stanford on their home court in Game 2 of their NCAA Regionals, so good luck to Coach Barnes-Arico and the Lady Wolverines. What would have been an amazing end of the season for Coach Red Berenson and the boys came to a crashing halt in the final CCHA championship game ever, played at the Joe on Sunday. For the first time in 22 years, Michigan hockey will not make an appearance in the NCAA tournament, getting underway this weekend. Not much news out of spring football so far, other than the injury to junior All-Big Ten linebacker Jake Ryan. Jake tore his ACL last week and will probably miss the upcoming season. He might be ready to play late in the year. We will just have to wait and see how his recovery goes. Hopefully that is the last major injury we suffered through spring practice. It was another good weekend for softball as they opened the Big Ten season with 3 wins over Purdue. They enter this week's action with a record of 24-7 and ranked 14th in the country. Baseball got another solid complete game start from freshman pitching sensation Evan Hill as the Wolverines split a pair on Saturday against Western Illinois. The young Wolverines are improving, but can't seem to get over the 500 mark and stay there. They are 10-11 heading into this week's play. Well, the way the regular season ended, I think most of us didn't hold much hope for the Wolverines sticking around long in the big dance. But as the coaches and the players always say, it's a new season, and it appears that Coach Beilein's team actually believes that. Michigan opened the NCAA tournament with 2 crushing performances, in large part because of the play of the 2 youngsters, Mitch McGarry and Glenn Robinson III. Now it gets tricky. Up next will be number 1 seed Kansas this Friday evening down at Cowboy Stadium. Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press joins me next on Michigan Game Day with his take on the Wolverines' chances of toppling this experienced and talented Jayhawks team, a team that just last year was in the Final Four in the national championship game against Kentucky. That's next here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. With us on Michigan Game Day, Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, too. We had a great weekend in our own backyard here. We know what's coming up this week, the Sweet 16. Let's just talk about, Mark, what happened over the weekend. Heading into the tournament, we knew Michigan needed strong performances from Trey Burke and Tim Hardaway Jr., of course. But they also needed some others to step it up. Mitch McGarry and Glenn Robinson III did that and more over the weekend, didn't they?
Yeah, I think that what people have waited for and wondered about, for most of the season, all came through at the right time. I mean, McGarry and Robinson were highly touted. They were the stars of this class coming in, and they lived up to it. I think the NCAA tournament, obviously, is all your best players playing well at the right times. And though they've been some of Michigan's best players, we haven't seen it more than spurts. And I think that what they're doing is they've maybe risen to the moment, and they understood that their season will be over if they don't show it at this point.
Well, Mark, both South Dakota State and VCU featured that more wide-open style, more conducive to the way the Wolverines like to play. We knew that heading in. But the defensive and rebounding efforts in both games from the Wolverines was much improved, too, and cannot be overlooked, can it?
No, definitely. And I think a lot of that starts with McGarry. He set the tone for that. He was very aggressive, and when he got the rebound, he put it back in. He didn't hesitate, and I think that was part of it. And they feed off his energy. I think having him in there and having him follow dribbling on the court makes a difference because the other players respond to that. They're more aggressive going to the basket, and Robinson connected with that. I mean, he saw what McGarry was doing, and he was more aggressive on the boards as well than he hasn't been in a while.
We've seen the glimpses during the season of what Mitch McGarry could be, and then at other times he struggled for consistency, like most freshmen do. Do you think this weekend's play signals the arrival of Mitch McGarry as a force in the middle, or was this just, again, a product of two teams just not being able to physically match up with him?
No, it could be the arrival. I mean, as long as he can sustain it. I think that, you can have 5 days to rest here, and I think that that's a really big part of what he can do going forward. I mean, if this is a sign of McGarry learning and him putting it together, then, he could be scary. And that's how you make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. You get contributions from a lot of people, and you have high-level players playing at a high level. And I think that it sounds simple, but that's really the difference. And I think McGarry makes them a matchup problem. Against Kansas, maybe that's a little bit different because they have a big man too, but there aren't many big men who can handle McGarry with the athleticism and the energy that he provides.
Do you think the Wolverines might be peaking right now, or is it too early to say that?
I think it's the games. I think that, peaking is a relative term. I think, again, they're playing competition that fits their style better, and I think that that's maybe a big part of it. They're going to play a great defensive team on Friday, and that maybe makes things a little bit different. I think, now they're going to play, one of the top two teams in the country, or, according to the seed list, going into the NCAA tournament. And if they play that well against Kansas, well, then, yeah, they're legit. If they play a good game and lose, well, then, it's what happened in the Big Ten a lot, that they played a bunch of good teams and just couldn't finish.
Well, as you said, Friday it's on to the Sweet 16 in Dallas, matchup with number 1 seed Kansas. In your Monday article, Mark, in the Free Press, you mentioned that while the Jayhawks and Michigan are similar from a talent perspective, center play could be the difference. Talk about the McGarry-Jeff Withey matchup we're going to see on Friday.
Well, the key is that Withey can do this consistently because he's a senior, because he's done this for years and years. That ability to kind of know the moment, and having gone to the national title game last year and making a run in the NCAA tournament, he knows what it was like weekend to weekend. He understands how to prepare himself, and he has an idea of what that moment feels like, and that's going to be the key. If McGarry can kind of capture that and rest himself up, then there's a possibility he could play into a draw. But the problem is Michigan wants to attack the basket offensively. We've seen that's when they're at their best, and that's what Withey does well if he blocks shots. He has 141 blocks already this season. I mean, those are outstanding numbers, especially on a team that plays in a high-level league against high-level opponents. So I think that it's going to be an interesting matchup, but it's good for McGarry because I think that, his emergence makes Michigan a viable threat. If he wasn't in this position and Michigan had squeaked by to win those last two games, well, then they'd have a problem. So, if they can match strength on strength, that's how you get a chance to advance against a great team.
Another thing about McGarry, when you watch him, he doesn't look like he is at all nervous. The moment doesn't bother him, does it?
No, I don't think I think that's just his nature that he doesn't get caught up in those things. I think that he's so focused on the energy that he kind of turns that into positive. Some guys, that energy becomes nervous and they can't handle they don't know what to do with it because they normally play at a consistent pace or economically, but he's always played energetic. And, that caused him some problems earlier in the year when he committed a lot of fouls. He didn't know how to place himself and those kind of things. But then once, in this scenario, when the pace is fast, I mean, if they get into a half-court game, yeah, maybe McGarry might struggle again. I mean, that's certainly possible, but that's probably not going to happen too often against Kansas because they like to push the ball too. So I think that these matchups in this draw has worked for Michigan, especially to get Gary involved.
Well, Kansas also boasts the player ranked #1 on ESPN.com's big board for the upcoming NBA draft, Ben McLemore, just an outstanding talent. He hasn't shot well over the first two games, but the Burke-McLemore matchup, if that indeed takes place, will also be really fascinating to watch, won't it?
Yeah, I think so. But, I think we hype up these matchups to a certain extent, like we did the Burke-Nate Walters thing in the South Dakota State game, and, neither of them played well. I think that the key for McLemore is that he needs to understand to take the load on and his athletic ability. But when he's forcing things and he's not playing in the offense, well, then, then they have to adjust without him. Burke can do things without being the scorer, as we saw. Even though he hadn't for most of the year, when South Dakota State, Michigan played a great game because Burke kept his head in the game and was able to distribute in that scenario when he wasn't scoring, when his shot wasn't falling. McLemore doesn't necessarily give them as much, either defensively or anything, if he's not making shots. They were fortunate to have Travis Relaford explode against North Carolina with like 22 points, and they got the guy off the bench, who helped them with a dozen. So that they picked up the slack. That's not going to happen for them to, it's not going to happen every game. It may not even happen one more game. So McLemore's got to come to play, or else Kansas might be in trouble.
Our guest on Michigan Game Day talking about the Sweet 16 is Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press, Michigan basketball beat writer. Mark, another aspect of Friday's game that can't be overlooked is the experience factor. Kansas, for the most part, a veteran team. They understand what it takes to get to the Final Four. They were just there last year. They know the pressure that's involved. That's a big advantage at this time of the year, isn't it?
I think so. I think the biggest advantage is how to handle a week like this. I think that, Michigan is riding high because they did something that none of these guys have ever done. Hasn't been done at the school in, 19 years. And so they are riding this high. But now they need to understand that they need to bring themselves back down and prepare like they did last week, when they were motivated because they had struggled with the Big Ten tournament. Now they're riding the high. They need to be able to handle the success. And that's something that Michigan has gone back and forth about this year. There were times when they couldn't handle success. They were 20-1, and then they kind of went into their tailspin to end the year. Even when they would have a good game, it would be followed by, some issues. So I think what Michigan needs to do is understand what this week's about, and Kansas will, because Bill Self has done this many times. Beeline has only been to 2 Sweet 16s, and one he lost the first game. So I think that's going to be a challenge. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for Michigan. I mean, talent-wise, they'll be okay. Health-wise, they're in good shape. They have all the pieces in, but the issue is how to handle this weekend, not to get too overhyped for that game on Friday when you have a long build-up.
Well, do you get a sense that Michigan, with all of the youth, is mentally prepared for a game of this magnitude?
Oh, yeah, I think that they can handle it because, obviously, last weekend showed that, that they can play different styles and stuff like that, and I think that they'll feed off the energy. The question is what they're going to be, because there's going to be a lot to look at. Obviously, we talked about this with football in the fall. When you go to Cowboys Stadium, it's a different environment than you've ever seen. You're looking at this huge screen, and the shooting backgrounds are not going to be great because there's a lot of depth there. You play at a basketball court in the biggest stadium in the country. So there's a lot of different dynamics going on there, and I think that if they can Beeline's trying to keep the routine, consistent this week. He's trying to take them and treat it like a road game, but Michigan hasn't played that well on the road either this year, and so that might be an interesting thing. I mean, Michigan's greatest success was 17-1 at home, 3 neutral site games where they had favorable Michigan crowds in New York, and then now 2 games at the past Auburn Hills with favorable Michigan crowds. So I think that Michigan's got to play much different than it has on the road this year.
Well, Mark, if the season does come to an end Friday in Dallas, do you think Michigan fans should still consider this a successful year?
Yes. I think that was Saturday, I guess, is the barometer. Reaching the Sweet 16 for this team was the minimum for success. I think they did that. You need to keep moving the program forward, and that's what they did. They did something that hadn't been done in how many years? In 19 years. So I think that qualifies it as a success. But the expectations change as you go. And so now that Michigan played very well in those 2 rounds, it changes. It makes you think, well, now maybe they can go farther. They didn't squeak by. They didn't say, oh, we're going to be happy to face a number 1 seed and, just do our best. They're expecting to go further. They know that the draw could favor them. Neither Kansas nor potentially Florida or Florida Gulf Coast seems like a major threat. I mean, they're not none of those are dominant teams. So I think the Michigan expectations have changed, and now they have to adapt to that.
Well, last question, Mark. Four Big Ten teams are in the Sweet 16. Illinois easily could have been the fifth team. Maybe a bad call kept them out of it. Who knows? But they could have been. Do you think these strong performances, validate the opinion of many that the Big Ten was the toughest conference out there this season?
Well, I don't think there's any question. I think that everyone has seen that, and they've all played well in this tournament. But, you look at the nature of the tournament. Aside from Michigan State, all these teams have been scared. Ohio State almost lost. Indiana almost lost. I mean, they both needed heroics in the last minute last couple seconds, in fact, to advance. And Illinois, they were on that line. They could have won, but they also lost. So these are all close games. That's what the NCAA tournament's about. And how Michigan and Michigan State handle when they have to actually play a tight game, which they haven't had to do yet in this tournament, is really going to determine the Big Ten's success. It'd be interesting to see a couple Big Ten teams in the Final Four, but we'll see. They all have a lot to go through at this point to get there.
It's going to be a big week, going to be exciting, and we look forward to following your coverage, of course, in the Detroit Free Press. Our guest today has been Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press, Michigan basketball beat writer. As always, Mark, it's been a pleasure, and we look forward to the next time.
Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Coming up next is Wolverine Quick Hits with all of the latest news on the Michigan athletic scene here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, the University of Michigan women's basketball team advanced to the second round of the 2013 NCAA tournament with a 60-52 victory over ninth-seeded Villanova on Sunday at Maples Pavilion on the Stanford University campus. The Wolverines had 4 players score in double figures and advanced to take on top-seeded Stanford, which is actually taking place tonight as we tape. On Sunday, Sheffer had a double-double, scoring 16 points and tying a career high with 13 rebounds. She became the 4th Wolverine to record a double-double in NCAA tournament history. Sheffer fell 1 rebound shy of the school record, 4 rebounds in an NCAA tournament. Senior guard Kate Thompson scored 13 of her team-high 17 points in the second half to help propel the Wolverines into the second round for the 3rd time in school history. Senior guard Jenny Ryan scored a career-best 13 points in NCAA tournament play and added 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals. So the Wolverines' 22 wins, 10 losses, heading into this evening's second-round action against Stanford, and the best of luck to Coach Barnes-Arico and the Lady Wolverines. The University of Michigan hockey team scored first, but failed to pull off the win in its 17th CCHA final game appearance, losing to Notre Dame by a score of 3-1 on Sunday at Joe Louis Arena. The Fighting Irish scored twice in the third stanza, securing the Mason Cup for the final time in the league's last championship tournament. Michigan's Jacob Trouba, Andrew Kopp, and Steve Racine were all named to the all-tournament team for the Maize and Blue. Freshman goaltender Steve Racine saved 30 of 33 shots faced in the loss, and Notre Dame's Stephen Summerhays stopped 20 of 21 Wolverine attempts. Michigan ends the season with 18 wins, 19 losses, and 3 ties. They were outstanding down the stretch. In their last 10 games, they went 8-1-1, but just came up 3 goals short, actually, of making their 23rd consecutive NCAA tournament appearance. It has been a great run for Coach Red Berenson and the hockey program, and I am certain they will be back in the tournament next year. In football news, junior linebacker Jake Ryan is out indefinitely with a torn anterior cruciate ligament suffered in last Tuesday's practice. The team made that announcement last Wednesday. You always hate when anyone gets injured, and unfortunately, we've dealt with our share of injuries in the last 12 months, said Michigan coach Brady Hoke. We will support Jake to make sure he has everything he needs to get through this. I know he will attack his rehabilitation just like he does everything else, and will be back when he's ready. Ryan led the Wolverines last season with 88 tackles, 56 solo, 16 stops for loss, 4.5 sacks, and 4 forced fumbles. He earned all Big Ten second team honors by the media and was the Roger Zatkoff Award recipient as Michigan's top linebacker. Dating back to 2011, Ryan had tallied a tackle for loss in 17 of his last 19 games, so a speedy recovery to Jake Ryan, and hopefully he will get back in the lineup at the end of the season. The number 14 ranked University of Michigan softball team erased deficits of 5 runs and 6 runs on its way to victories of 13-5 in 6 innings and 8-7 over the Purdue Boilermakers in a doubleheader Saturday at the Wilpon Complex. The 3-game series served as U of M's Big Ten and home opening weekend, so Michigan off to a great start in the conference race, 3-0, overall 24 wins, 7 losses, and ranked number 14 in the country heading into this week's action. The Wolverines will be playing this afternoon against Bowling Green at 4 p.m., the game taking place at the Wilpon Complex. In baseball, freshman Evan Hill threw a complete game one-hitter to highlight the University of Michigan baseball team's doubleheader split against Western Illinois Saturday. That action took place at Nicolay Field on the campus of Adrian College. The Wolverines won the opener 6-1, but fell in the nightcap 2-1. Michigan was supposed to play in Flushing, New York at Citi Field, home of the New York Mets, yesterday, but that game was rained out. Heading into this weekend's action, Michigan flirting with the 500 mark, but can't seem to just get there and get over the hump. This young squad has a record of 10 wins and 11 losses right now. We've waited a long time for Michigan basketball to be back on the big stage. It's been 19 years, but we are back. Regardless of what happens Friday night in Dallas, Coach John Beilein and his staff have restored the program, set the foundation for the future, and made Michigan men and fans everywhere very proud this season. So who knows where the ride will end, but let's enjoy it this weekend. Friday night at Cowboy Stadium, Michigan versus Kansas. Go Blue. For all of the latest Wolverine news, become a member here at GBM Wolverine. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and sign up for membership today. That way you won't miss a minute of our exceptional coverage of Michigan's NCAA tournament run and everything else taking place right now during this very busy time of the year. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and become a member today. A reminder that the show is now available in the Android App Store, at Amazon.com, and the iTunes App Store. So get the Michigan Man Podcast app and stay up to date on all the latest Wolverine news. If you'd like to be included on a future show, you can call our listener line, which is open 24/7, at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Tell us what you think about anything maize and blue, keep it clean, and maybe you'll hear yourself on an upcoming show. You can also email us at the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. So don't be shy, give us a shout. And in case you didn't have a pen or a pencil handy, I will have the phone number and the email address on my show notes page. Thanks to Michigan basketball beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press for being our guest today. We'll be right back here next week, and hopefully we'll be talking about the Wolverines in the Final Four. It could happen, and it should be an exciting weekend. Enjoy the game Friday night, and have a wonderful and happy Easter. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!